You are a temporary solution. I can find a replacement in 24 hours. My wife said this to me one evening.
I said, challenge accepted. I picked up my things and left the apartment. Next day, she came back crying, calling it a mistake. But I told her to complete her challenge. She then decided to come after my money. But I have covered all the legal aspects.
The night everything unraveled began with the kind of ordinary calm that makes hindsight feel almost cruel. I was seated at the dining room table, reviewing quarterly projections for my software company, numbers glowing neatly across my laptop screen. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the faint clink of ice settling in the glass beside me. It was the kind of evening that should have passed without consequence. My wife, Victoria, entered like a sudden storm. Her designer heels struck the marble floor with sharp, deliberate clicks, each step announcing urgency before she even spoke. She didn't greet me. Instead, she stepped directly into my line of sight and dangled her car keys inches from my face, forcing my attention away from spreadsheets and projections. "Evan, we need to talk about my car situation. Now." I looked up slowly, already feeling the familiar pressure beginning behind my eyes, the warning sign of another argument. I knew I wouldn't win. Her sleek luxury sedan was barely 2 years old, still immaculate, still admired by anyone who saw it. Yet for months, she had been dropping increasingly obvious hints about wanting something new. Ever since her friend Jessica's husband had purchased her an electric vehicle, the conversation had resurfaced with relentless frequency. "What's wrong with your car?" I asked, keeping my voice as even as possible. It was a question we had revisited multiple times, each discussion ending in the same unresolved tension. Victoria rolled her eyes with theatrical exasperation and dropped into the chair across from me. She crossed her legs sharply, posture rigid with impatience. "The Harrison Winters are all driving electric now," she said. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to pull up to the country club brunch in something outdated? Even Sarah Mitchell, and she's just a junior associate, got one last week. People notice these things, Evan, people talk." I closed my laptop carefully, buying myself a few seconds to choose words that might prevent escalation. Experience had taught me that tone mattered more than content. "We just invested heavily in expanding the Austin office," I said. "The timing isn't great for another major purchase, and your car works perfectly. We don't actually need—" Her voice rose before I finished. "Don't need. I use that car every single day. It represents me. How am I supposed to project success when I'm driving yesterday's technology? Do you ever think about how this affects my image?" "It's still a luxury vehicle," I replied quietly. "We can revisit the conversation in a few months." Her hand slammed against the table, rattling my coffee mug. The sound fractured the calm that had once filled the room. "I need it now," she insisted. "The Mitchell Foundation Gala is in 3 weeks. Jessica already told everyone about my new car. What am I supposed to do, show up in that old thing, and admit my fiancé won't support me?" Something inside me shifted at the word old. That car had cost more than most people earned in a year. It had been purchased less than 2 years earlier. The logic of the argument no longer mattered. The issue had never been about transportation. For 3 years, I had been gradually reshaping myself to fit her expectations. My wardrobe had changed. My haircut had changed. My circle of friends had quietly disappeared, replaced by acquaintances chosen for networking value. I had even moved us from my downtown loft into this polished neighborhood she preferred, a decision that tripled our living expenses and erased the last trace of a life that once felt like mine. "Your car is practically new," I said, my voice steady but distant. "It's not outdated, it's just not the newest thing available." Her eyes hardened. The shift was immediate and unmistakable. "My father was right about you," she said coldly. "Once a scholarship kid, always a scholarship kid. You still think like someone who grew up with nothing." I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that silence often prolonged her frustration, but speaking only gave her more ground to attack. My company had cleared 8 figures the previous year, yet she possessed an uncanny ability to locate the one insecurity that still lingered from a different life. She leaned forward, her tone lowering into a controlled, dangerous softness. "You think I don't have options?" she asked. "Do you know how many men would love to be with someone like me?" She gestured toward herself with a slow, deliberate movement, perfect posture, perfect presentation, perfection carefully curated. When I remained silent, something calculating appeared behind her eyes. "I could replace you in 24 hours, she said. "One post, one call, 24 hours, Evan. You're a temporary solution until something better comes along. The words settled between us with startling clarity. In that instant, a realization formed with absolute precision. I saw our future unfolding exactly as the present moment suggested. Years of escalating demands, constant dissatisfaction, quiet resentment. Two people locked in a cycle that stripped dignity from both of us. I stood slowly. "Is that how you see me?" I asked. "A temporary solution?" She blinked, surprised by my composure. She had expected resistance, negotiation, apology. Those had always been my patterns. "Well, if you're going to be stubborn about things that matter to me," she began. I nodded once, absorbing the confirmation. Then I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I retrieved a suitcase from the custom closet she had insisted on installing the previous spring. Behind me, her footsteps followed quickly, the sharp rhythm of her heels now tinged with urgency. "What are you doing?" she demanded, confusion overtaking irritation. "Giving you the opportunity you mentioned," I replied, folding clothes with deliberate precision. "You said 24 hours, you'll need space." "You're overreacting," she said, though a tremor crept into her voice. "This is ridiculous. Put that away." I continued packing, selecting only what belonged to me personally. Clothes, personal items, technology, nothing shared, nothing symbolic. "Evan, stop. I was making a point." "So am I." I zipped the suitcase and faced her. "I won't be anyone's temporary solution." Her expression hardened into controlled anger. "You're seriously leaving because of one comment?" she scoffed. "You're too sensitive. This is exactly why my father said you lacked executive toughness." "It wasn't one comment," I said calmly. "It was honesty, yours and mine." I lifted the suitcase and walked toward the door. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails pressing into my skin. "You can't just walk out. Where will you go? What about the gala? What about our engagement photos next week?" I gently removed her hand. "I'm sure someone eager to replace me will be happy to step in." Her expression shifted once more, this time into the carefully measured vulnerability she had used so effectively before. "If you walk out that door," she said, her voice breaking with practiced emotion, "don't think you can just come back tomorrow when you realize what you've lost. There won't be a place for you here." I set my house keys down on the marble entryway table with deliberate care. The soft clink echoed through the cavernous foyer. It was a small sound, but it felt final, heavier than any raised voice or slammed door. "I won't be coming back, Victoria," I said calmly. "Make sure you find your upgrade within 24 hours. After that, you'll need to figure out how to cover the mortgage on your own. My name might be on the deed, but you insisted on having your name alone on the loan documents to build your credit. Remember?" For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes widened not with anger, not with indignation, but with genuine shock. The certainty she usually wore like armor cracked visibly across her expression. She had expected resistance, bargaining, maybe even pleading. She had not expected consequences. "You wouldn't," she whispered, disbelief threading through the words. I opened the door and stepped out into the warm Texas night before she could gather herself enough to respond. The air outside wrapped around me like something cleansing, a quiet contrast to the tension I had left behind. "Good luck with your search," I said, without turning back. "I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for." The door closed behind me with a firm, measured click. Outside, the night was still and expansive. I placed my suitcase into the back of my Jeep, the one vehicle she had never succeeded in convincing me to trade for something more appropriate. She had tried, repeatedly, but this was the one purchase I had refused to surrender. Standing there now, I realized it had never been about the car. It had been about keeping one piece of myself intact. My hands were steady as I climbed into the driver's seat, but my thoughts moved rapidly, colliding with memories that suddenly felt distant and unreal. 3 years with Victoria, 3 years of adjustment, compromise, justification, gone in a single evening. Or perhaps they had dissolved long before, and I had simply been unwilling to acknowledge the truth. I drove without direction, letting muscle memory guide me through familiar streets that felt strangely foreign. Neon signs blurred past the windshield. Traffic lights changed, unnoticed. The silence in the car was immense, broken only by the low rumble of the engine and the occasional sigh I didn't realize I was releasing. Nearly an hour passed before I pulled over beneath a streetlight and reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted enough to call at midnight. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Evan, it's almost midnight. Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted quietly. "I left Victoria, it's over." There was a pause long enough to be meaningful, long enough for her to measure the weight of what I'd said. For real this time? She asked gently. The question stung, but it was fair. I had threatened to leave before, twice. Each time I had been pulled back by tears, apologies, promises that things would change. Each time I had believed those promises. For real, I confirmed. I don't suppose you know of any hotels near you that won't charge me the equivalent of a small car for a last-minute room. Her voice sharpened instantly, fully awake now. Don't be ridiculous, you're coming here. I'll make up the guest room. I don't want to impose. Evan Mercer, she interrupted. How many times did you let me crash on your couch during the apartment flood? You're coming here. I'll text you the gate code. 40 minutes later, I was sitting on her couch with a cold beer in my hand, recounting everything, from the first raised voice to the final slammed door. We had been friends since college, long before Victoria entered my life. She had always possessed an uncanny ability to see through pretense, which was likely why Victoria had gradually encouraged distance between us over the years. She actually said you were a temporary solution? She asked, studying me with quiet intensity. Her exact words. She shook her head slowly. Wow, and to think I kept my mouth shut at your wedding party. I glanced at her. What does that mean? She hesitated, peeling at the label on her bottle before answering. Evan, she's always treated you like an accessory, not a partner. Everyone could see it. We just didn't think it was our place to interfere. The truth landed heavily. I leaned back into the couch cushions, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. I've been such an idiot, I murmured. No, she said firmly. You've been in love, that's not the same thing. She's very good at shaping perception, including yours. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, though the question felt more rhetorical than practical. Tonight, she said, taking my empty bottle, you sleep. Tomorrow you call your lawyer, and after that you start remembering who you were before she decided you needed to be redesigned. I managed a faint smile. When did you become so wise? Right around the time you became so blind, she replied gently. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in months. Morning arrived with relentless vibration from my phone, 17 missed calls, 38 text messages swinging wildly between rage and apology. One voicemail filled with alternating sobs and veiled threats. I read them all without emotional response, as if observing someone else's life. The final message stood out. I didn't mean it. Please come home. We can talk. I love you. I canceled the order. For a moment, the familiar pull resurfaced, the instinct to smooth conflict, to restore stability, to preserve the structure of a life that had once seemed secure. It would be easy to return, to pretend this rupture was temporary, to convince myself that change was possible. Instead, I opened social media and posted a photograph of the sunrise from the balcony. The caption was simple: new beginnings start with clear vision. No accusations, no explanations, just a quiet acknowledgement of change. The response was immediate. Notifications flooded in: mutual friends, acquaintances, business contacts. Questions, speculation. Concern disguised as curiosity. I silenced the phone and walked into the kitchen. Breakfast was already in progress. I heard your phone having a meltdown, she said, sliding a mug of coffee toward me. Something like that, I replied. She placed a plate in front of me. Eat, then we make a plan. The plan was practical and efficient. Call my attorney. Change passwords, redirect mail, secure accounts. Small, concrete actions that slowly untangled my life from hers. You might want to check her social media, she suggested after we finished. I hesitated before opening the profile. The posts were immediate and carefully composed. Elegant cocktails held beside an unseen companion. Cryptic captions about growth and transformation. A new dress I had never seen, paired with a caption about rising stronger. Each image projected effortless confidence. Each message communicated the same narrative. She was thriving, untouched, already moving forward. Well, my friend said quietly beside me, she's maintaining her image. I studied the screen for a moment longer, then locked the phone and set it aside. For the first time in years, the performance no longer involved me. She was certainly committed to the narrative. 24 hours, I muttered, staring at the screen of my phone. She's really trying to prove she can replace me in 24 hours. Let her try, Clara said calmly. She reached across the table, took the phone from my hand, and placed it face down with quiet finality. Meanwhile, you're going to focus on yourself, starting with a trip to the gym to work off some of that stress you've been carrying like a second spine. The next few days unfolded in a rhythm I hadn't realized I needed. There was structure where chaos had once dominated. There was silence where tension had lived. And perhaps most surprising of all, there was space. Space to think, to breathe, to exist without negotiation. Mornings began at the gym. At first, the workouts were fueled by anger and adrenaline. Each repetition, an outlet for frustration I hadn't known how to express for years. But gradually, something shifted. The intensity softened into discipline. The strain gave way to clarity. Sweat replaced resentment, and physical exertion became a form of grounding rather than escape. My days were spent at the office, reconnecting with a business I had allowed to drift to the margins of my attention. For months, my focus had been divided. Meetings cut short, decisions delayed, energy redirected toward maintaining a relationship that demanded constant adjustment. Now, with uninterrupted concentration, problems that once felt overwhelming became manageable. Projects moved forward, conversations were direct. The work regained its familiar sense of purpose. Evenings were quieter. Clara would stop by my temporary apartment, and we would sit at the small kitchen table, discussing practical steps for rebuilding a life that felt authentically mine. The apartment itself was modest, clean lines, neutral walls, minimal furnishings, no elaborate decor choices, no debates over aesthetics or status. I bought what I needed, nothing more. For the first time in years, every decision was mine alone. There was a surprising relief in simplicity. No arguments over paint colors, no justification required for practical purchases, no $900 coffee table deemed essential for image. The absence of conflict was not empty, it was restorative. Meanwhile, Victoria's social media campaign continued with relentless precision. Each post presented a carefully curated portrait of independence and triumph. Photos appeared of her at upscale lounges with unfamiliar companions, elegant cocktails positioned strategically in the frame. Check-ins at exclusive restaurants populated her timeline. Captions spoke of growth, liberation, transformation. To an uncritical observer, she appeared radiant and unbothered. But the frequency of the updates told another story. The urgency beneath the polish was impossible to miss. It was performance disguised as peace projection masquerading as progress. A week after the breakup, my lawyer called. "She's contesting the separation of assets," he informed me in a tone that balanced professionalism with faint disbelief. "She claims she's entitled to a percentage of your business because, and I quote, her connections and social guidance were instrumental in its success." I laughed. Not politely, not defensively, I actually laughed. "She's never set foot in my office," I said. "She doesn't even know what the company does beyond something with software." "Nevertheless," he continued, "she has retained Patricia Westfield." The laughter stopped. That name carried weight in Austin's legal circles. Westfield was known for aggressive tactics and relentless pursuit of settlements. She specialized in extracting maximum advantage from emotionally charged disputes. "Fine," I said after a moment of reflection. "Give them everything they ask for." "Excuse me?" My lawyer sounded genuinely startled. "All the financial records, text messages, emails, everything," I said evenly, "including the prenup she signed, where she explicitly waived any claim to my business assets." Silence followed, then a low, understanding chuckle. "I see," he said. "Let them build an argument that collapses the moment documentation appears." Exactly. She never believed I would actually leave. She probably doesn't even remember what she signed. That evening, I explained the conversation to Clara as we shared takeout at my kitchen table. "That's brilliant," she said, twirling noodles around her fork. "But also a little intimidating. When did you become so strategic?" I shrugged. "Running a company teaches you to think several steps ahead. Victoria isn't the only one who understands image management." She studied me with a thoughtful expression. "You've changed this past week." "I had to," I replied, surprised by how natural the words felt. "You know what's strange? I don't even miss her. I miss the idea of what we might have been, but I don't miss who we actually were." "That's clarity," she said quietly, "and it suits you." Our eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, more like an awareness that had always existed, but had never been acknowledged. I had always recognized her attractiveness in a distant, objective way. But now, without the constraints of loyalty or obligation, that awareness carried a different weight. She broke the moment first, standing to collect the empty containers. "You should stay focused on the legal situation," she said lightly. "Everything else can wait." She was right. But for the first time since leaving Victoria, my thoughts drifted toward possibility rather than damage control. The following morning brought an unexpected development. My phone rang as I drove to the office. It was Connor, a mutual friend whose tone immediately signaled concern. Have you seen what Victoria's been saying about you? He asked. I've been avoiding social media, I admitted. Why? What's happening? It's bad, he said carefully. She's telling people you emotionally abused her, that you controlled finances, isolated her from friends. She's got a lot of people convinced. I nearly missed a red light, braking sharply. She's what? Check your email, I sent screenshots. I pulled into a parking lot and opened the message. There they were, tearful video clips, carefully worded posts, narratives crafted with precision. She portrayed herself as a survivor of manipulation, someone who had finally escaped a controlling partner. She had even created a highlight reel titled Healing. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. This was no longer personal drama. It was reputational warfare. In a city where professional networks intertwined with social circles, perception could shape opportunity. Connor, I said quietly, you know this isn't true, right? Of course I know, he replied immediately. Most people who actually know you aren't buying it, but she has a following and people love a dramatic story. After ending the call, I contacted my lawyer. His guidance was precise: document everything, avoid public response, accelerate legal proceedings. Desperation, he assured me, often leads to mistakes. By the time I arrived at the office, the news had spread. My assistant's expression confirmed it before she spoke. I'm guessing you've seen the posts, I said. Everyone has, she admitted. We've already had calls from journalists requesting comment. Direct everything to legal, I instructed. And Jennifer, I'm sorry you're caught in this. She shook her head. No one here believes any of it. We've all met her. People notice more than you think. I thanked her and retreated to my office, closing the door behind me. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the city skyline beyond the window. For years, I had responded to conflict by accommodating it, softening it, attempting to neutralize it through compromise. But this situation required a different approach. Victoria had always possessed an uncanny ability to shape perception. Facts bent around her, narratives softened in her favor. She knew which strings to pull in Austin's social circles and which silences to exploit. Watching her transform a private breakup into a public spectacle had made one thing painfully clear. Responding within the same arena meant playing by rules she understood far better than I ever would. If I wanted resolution, I needed to change the game entirely. The idea arrived gradually, assembling itself from frustration and reluctant insight. It was not a comfortable plan. It carried risk, the potential for escalation, and the certainty of emotional fallout. Yet beneath those concerns lay a sense of balance, something resembling poetic justice. There was one person whose influence Victoria respected above all others. One voice she could neither ignore nor manipulate indefinitely. I picked up my phone and dialed. Mrs. Hale, this is Evan Mercer, I said when she answered. I think we need to talk about your daughter. Eleanor Hale had never concealed her disapproval of me. As the wife of a prominent real estate developer, whose name carried weight in Austin's oldest social circles, she had envisioned a very different future for Victoria. At a memorable Thanksgiving dinner 2 years earlier, she had referred to me, within earshot of the entire table, as a nouveau rich technology experiment. The phrase had been delivered with a polite smile and unmistakable disdain. Still, there was one principle Eleanor valued above prestige or personal preference: the preservation of family reputation. That was why she agreed to meet. She chose a discreet coffee shop, far from her usual circles, a place where anonymity could be maintained. When she arrived, her presence commanded attention despite the understated setting. Her tailored suit was immaculate, her posture rigid, her expression carefully neutral. I will give you 10 minutes, she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from me. Though I cannot imagine what you have to say that would interest me after the way you have treated Victoria. With respect, I replied calmly, you've heard only one version of events. I slid a slim folder across the table. I thought you might want to review the other. She did not touch it immediately. Her gaze lingered on the folder as though it might reveal its contents through sheer scrutiny. What exactly is this? She asked. Financial records, text messages. Security footage from our home, I explained evenly. Documentation of behavior I have concealed for years out of consideration for your family. Her manicured hand hovered above the folder, hesitation replacing certainty. What kind of behavior? The kind that could severely damage your family's standing if it became public, I said quietly. Particularly incidents involving individuals connected to your husband's professional network. Color drained subtly from her face. I do not believe you. Page 12, I said. The Wellington fundraiser after party. She opened the folder with deliberate care and flipped through the pages. As she read, her expression shifted in stages, skepticism giving way to disbelief, disbelief to recognition, recognition to something far more unsettling. The composure she maintained so carefully began to fracture. "This," she whispered, "this cannot be accurate." "It is," I said gently, "and it is not isolated." She looked up, and for the first time since I had known her, uncertainty replaced authority. "Victoria would never." "She did," I said. "Repeatedly." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice measured. "I am not here to threaten you. I have no intention of releasing any of this publicly. I want only one outcome. That Victoria retract her false accusations, and that we proceed with a private, dignified separation." Elinor closed the folder slowly, her hands no longer steady. "Why bring this to me?" she asked, "instead of using it in court?" "Because I do not want to destroy her," I said truthfully, "or your family. I want closure, not spectacle." She studied me for a long moment, as though reassessing assumptions she had held for years. "I never understood what Victoria saw in you," she said quietly. "Your background, your business, your independence from our world, but I believe I am beginning to." "I will consider that progress," I replied. "Do not," she said sharply, rising from her chair. She clutched the folder against her side. "I will speak with Victoria and my husband. This situation will end." I watched her leave, feeling no satisfaction, only a profound exhaustion. The contents of that folder were not exaggerations or interpretations. They were facts I had rationalized, ignored, or forgiven in the name of love. Screenshots of inappropriate messages, hidden expenditures, recorded outbursts when she believed privacy shielded her behavior. For years, I had protected those truths. Now, they served a different purpose. My phone vibrated with a message from Clara. How did it go? I typed 2 words in response. "It's done." The impact was immediate. Within hours, Victoria's inflammatory posts vanished. The highlight reel portraying her as a victim disappeared. In their place appeared a single, carefully composed statement, acknowledging emotional overreaction and affirming my integrity. It was precise, controlled, and unmistakably strategic. When I showed it to Clara that evening, she let out a low whistle. "What did you say to her mother?" "The truth," I answered. "Sometimes that's more powerful than any threat." She nodded slowly. "It worked. But you know this isn't finished." "I know," I said, "but at least she understands I won't remain passive." The following day confirmed Clara's prediction. Victoria's public silence was matched by renewed legal maneuvering. Her attorney delivered revised demands, more restrained than before, yet still seeking significant financial concessions. "She's testing limits," my lawyer explained, "evaluating how much leverage remains." "Offer only what the prenup requires," I instructed. "Nothing additional." Several days of negotiations followed. I immersed myself in work, welcoming problems governed by logic rather than emotion. Evenings were calm. Clara often brought dinner, and our conversations deliberately avoided past conflicts. Then on Friday afternoon, my lawyer called again. "She is withdrawing all claims beyond prenup provisions," he reported. "Additionally, she has accepted a position in Lowe's Angels and wishes to expedite proceedings." "Lowe's Angels," I repeated, surprised. Victoria had always insisted her influence depended on remaining in Austin. "An executive public relations role with a streaming company," he continued. "Her counsel states she seeks a fresh start." The explanation sounded polished, too polished. After ending the call, I sat quietly, considering the development. Victoria was not someone who surrendered gracefully. Sudden retreat did not align with her nature. I called Connor, whose connections in media circles were extensive. "Have you heard of major PR openings at streaming companies in Lowe's Angels recently?" I asked. "That's specific," he replied. "Why?" "Victoria claims she accepted a position there." There was a pause as he typed. "I'm not seeing anything significant," he said eventually. "Which company?" "Unspecified." "Let me ask around," he said. "I'll find out what I can." Connor's keyboard clattered faintly through the phone, a rapid rhythm of searching and cross-checking. I could picture him leaning over his desk, eyes narrowed, piecing together fragments of industry gossip the way he always did when something smelled off. "Hold on," he muttered. "Julia mentioned something last week. Yeah, here it is. Michael Harrington just left Netflix. Big scandal, quiet exit, practically buried." My grip tightened around the steering wheel. "What kind of scandal?" "No official statement," Connor said, lowering his voice instinctively, even though we were the only ones on the line. "But the rumor mill says it involved personal conduct, And now that I'm thinking about it, he and Victoria looked very close at that charity gala last year. Tight how? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. The kind of clothes that gets people whispering, Connor replied, especially since his wife was out of town that night. The remaining pieces fell neatly into place, aligning with unsettling precision. Thanks, Connor, I said quietly. That explains a lot. I ended the call and immediately dialed Clara. She answered on the second ring. Victoria's running away with Michael Harrington, I said without preamble. The Netflix executive. Isn't he married? She asked, surprised. Was married, I corrected. Or about to be. She's not relocating for a job in Los Angeles. She's following him. Silence stretched briefly on the line. How do you feel about that? Clara asked carefully. I considered the question with more honesty than I might have expected. Relieved, I admitted. If she's focused on him, she's not focused on making my life difficult. That makes sense, Clara said, though something in her tone suggested she was weighing a deeper concern. Does it bother you that she moved on so quickly? It didn't. That realization surprised me as much as the question itself. No, I said slowly. It actually clarifies things. She told me she could replace me within 24 hours. Turns out, she had a replacement ready long before that. There was a pause on Clara's end, longer this time. Evan, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. A knot formed instantly in my stomach. What is it? Not over the phone. Can you come over tonight? I'll be there in an hour. Clara's apartment greeted me with a calm, subdued atmosphere. Soft candlelight flickered across the room, casting gentle shadows against the walls. An open bottle of wine rested on the coffee table beside 2 glasses. The scene felt deliberate, but not romantic, more like the careful preparation for a difficult conversation. She was pacing when I walked in, her usual composure replaced by visible tension. This feels serious, I said lightly, accepting the glass she offered. It is, she replied, sitting down and gesturing for me to join her. I need to show you something. She handed me her phone. A message thread filled the screen. The contact name was simply V. The timestamp stretched back nearly 2 years, long before Victoria and I became engaged. I scrolled slowly, each message striking with growing weight. Victoria complained about me with clinical detachment. She strategized about reshaping my image to fit her social ambitions. She described encounters with other men with unsettling casualness. She mocked my work, my appearance. The cumulative effect was suffocating. How long have you had these? I asked quietly. Clara's expression tightened. Since they started. She thought I would take her side, or at least keep her secrets. She kept sending messages even after I stopped responding. Why didn't you tell me? I tried in the beginning, she said softly. Remember that dinner after you moved in together, when I suggested you might be rushing things? I did remember. I had dismissed her concerns, convinced she was simply being overly protective. You seemed happy, she continued. I didn't want to destroy that without undeniable proof, and by the time I had proof, I wouldn't have believed you, I finished. She nodded. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. I should have found another way to make you see. I returned her phone, my thoughts reordering years of memories with new clarity. Late work nights, unexplained trips, vague explanations that I had accepted without question. Each fragment now carried a different meaning. There's something else, Clara said, scrolling to a recent message. This came yesterday. A single line from Victoria filled the screen. I hope you're happy now. You've wanted him for yourself since college. Congratulations on playing the long game. I looked up sharply. What is she talking about? Clara set the phone aside, color rising in her cheeks. She always believed I had feelings for you, she said quietly. That's why she tried to push me out of your life. And did you? I asked, my voice steadier than my pulse. Have feelings for me? Silence expanded between us, dense with unspoken years. Yes, she admitted finally, but that's not why I showed you the messages. You deserve to know who she really is, regardless of how you feel about me. I reached across the couch and gently took her hand. Clara, I said, for 3 years I was with someone who saw me as a project, a temporary solution. When everything fell apart, the only person I wanted to call, the one I trusted completely, was you. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, vulnerable and searching. It's always been you, she whispered. I'm not saying this because I'm angry or lonely, I continued. I'm saying it because leaving Victoria forced me to see clearly. You've been the constant in my life, the person who never needed me to become someone else. She studied my face carefully. What happens when time passes? She asked. When the divorce is final and everything settles. What if you realize this is just a reaction to everything that happened? Then we face that honestly, I said. Together, I'm not asking for guarantees, I'm asking for a chance. A genuine smile slowly replaced her uncertainty. I think I can do that. As we leaned closer, her phone vibrated on the table. Neither of us looked at it. Whatever message arrived belonged to a chapter already closing. The weeks that followed unfolded with unexpected momentum. Victoria signed the divorce documents quickly from Lowe's angels, waiving challenges she had previously pursued with determination. According to the steady stream of industry gossip Connor relayed, she and Michael Harrington had already established a new life together in a Malibu beachfront property. Their social media presence presented curated images of sunsets, champagne, and captions about unexpected love. The performance continued, but it no longer involved me. Meanwhile, my relationship with Clara evolved naturally, almost quietly. There was no dramatic shift, no overwhelming declaration, only a gradual deepening built on familiarity and trust. We approached each other with caution, aware that genuine connection required patience, especially after emotional upheaval. We cooked dinner together. We talked without pretense. We learned what it meant to choose each other deliberately, rather than by circumstance. There were no performances anymore, no strategic silences or carefully calibrated reactions. Just two people choosing honesty because it felt easier than pretense. Clara and I fell into a rhythm that was almost disarmingly simple. Shared meals, late conversations, quiet laughter that required no explanation. There were no games to decode, no hidden motives waiting beneath ordinary words. We were simply present with one another, and that presence, uncomplicated and steady, became its own kind of anchor. The stability extended into every corner of my life. With my attention no longer fractured by constant emotional negotiation, my business began to flourish in ways I had once only hoped for. Deals that had stalled for months suddenly gained momentum, once I was fully engaged in the process again. 2 major contracts were finalized within weeks, agreements that not only strengthened our market position, but also validated expansion plans I had postponed repeatedly during the final year of my relationship with Victoria. Back then, strategic investments had been redirected toward personal demands that always seemed urgent, always justified, and always costly. Now the decisions were mine alone. Clear, practical, sustainable. For a brief, almost fragile stretch of time, life settled into something resembling peace. That was precisely why the disruption, when it arrived, felt inevitable in retrospect. It came on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of an urgent call from my lawyer. His tone carried none of its usual measured professionalism. "Victoria's back in town," he said immediately, dispensing with pleasantries. "And she's attempting to reopen the settlement." I stepped away from my desk, closing the office door behind me and lowering my voice. "On what grounds? She signed everything." "She's claiming duress," he replied. "According to her statement, she agreed to the terms while emotionally compromised and under pressure from both you and her family." I pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose, feeling tension gather behind my eyes. "That's absurd," I said quietly. "She insisted on accelerating the process so she could relocate to Lowe's Angels with her boyfriend." There was a pause. "Ex-boyfriend, apparently," my lawyer corrected. "His divorce proceedings have stalled. His wife is contesting their prenup. His assets are frozen, real estate included." Understanding settled in with uncomfortable clarity. "So Victoria's financial support system collapsed." "Precisely. And now she's seeking alternative funding." "What are her chances legally?" "Minimal," he admitted. "But the legal strength of her case may be secondary. She may simply be betting that you'll settle to avoid prolonged litigation." "That won't happen," I said firmly. "We contest everything." After ending the call, I sent a brief message to Clara. "She's back. Legal trouble." Her response arrived almost immediately. "On my way. Do nothing until I get there." By the time Clara entered my office, the situation had escalated significantly. 3 calls from blocked numbers blinked on my phone. My inbox contained a sequence of emails from Victoria, each more urgent than the last. Some pleaded, others implied consequences. All were carefully worded attempts to provoke engagement. "She's unraveling," Clara observed, scanning the messages over my shoulder. "Look at the timing. The gaps between emails are shrinking. That's panic behavior." "My lawyer thinks she's broke," I said. "Her financial safety net disappeared." Clara nodded slowly. "She's never operated without external support. She moved from dependence to dependence. Losing that structure would feel catastrophic to someone like her." And now she wants to restore the previous arrangement, I said, closing the email window with deliberate finality. That's not happening. She won't accept that easily, Clara warned. When persuasion fails, she escalates. Her prediction materialized almost immediately. My desk phone rang. Jennifer from reception spoke with controlled urgency. Mr. Mercer, Victoria Hale is here, insisting on seeing you. Security is asking how you'd like to proceed. I exchanged a glance with Clara. Escort her out, I said, calmly. I'm not available. Even through the closed office door, Victoria's voice became audible, sharp, insistent, rising in volume as security maintained their position. This is absurd. I'm his wife. Evan, I know you're here. I rubbed my temples, the first signs of a headache forming. This is only the beginning, I said quietly. Clara reached across the desk, her hand warm and steady over mine. We handle it together. Eventually, the noise faded, replaced by an uneasy quiet. It lasted less than a minute before my phone lit up again. The messages arrived rapidly. You're making a huge mistake. I know about you and that photographer. You think you've won. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Clara read them without speaking, her expression tightening. We document everything, she said finally, and we should consider a restraining order. I've already forwarded them to legal, I replied. Let's leave. I need air. We exited through the rear of the building to avoid the lobby. The parking garage was quiet, the air cool and echoing. Clara suddenly stopped mid-step, her grip tightening on my arm. Your car, she said softly. The sight halted me completely. Both front tires had been slashed. Deep, jagged scratches cut across the driver's door, carving a single word into the paint with unmistakable force. Liar, a cold steadiness replaced the shock. Cameras, I said, pulling out my phone. This garage is fully monitored. The footage confirmed what we already knew. Within hours, security provided clear video evidence of Victoria, face partially concealed but unmistakable, systematically damaging the vehicle before walking away with deliberate composure. Legal consequences followed quickly. A restraining order was granted the next morning. Law enforcement issued a vandalism citation, yet the escalation did not end there. The focus simply shifted. Clara became the new target. It began subtly, anonymous negative reviews appearing on her photography website. Then cancellations followed. Clients she had worked with for years withdrew without clear explanation. Some offered vague concerns. Others avoided contact entirely. She's telling people I'm unstable, Clara said after ending a particularly strained call. That I pursued you while you were married, that I'm under investigation. Anger surged through me, sharp and immediate. That's defamation, I said. We pursue legal action. With what proof? Clara asked quietly. It's all suggestion and implication. A lawsuit would only prolong her access to us. She was right, and that truth was deeply frustrating. Watching her endure consequences rooted in my past choices created a specific kind of helplessness I had never experienced before. What if we change the approach? I suggested slowly. Not retaliation. Transparency. She looked skeptical. Explain. Every industry maintains informal warning networks, places where professionals document harmful behavior. What if we create something similar, strictly factual, verifiable information? No speculation, no exaggeration. Clara considered the idea, hesitation gradually giving way to recognition. A documented record, she said. A resource, protection through visibility. That evening, we worked side by side, building a simple, professional website. Its structure was clean, factual, restrained. Each entry included only documented events. The vandalism report, screenshots of threatening messages, timelines of verified incidents. No commentary, no emotional language. Only evidence. At the bottom of the page, we added a single line and a secure submission form. If you have documented experiences relevant to these events, you may share them here. We published it without announcement. The intention was not revenge. It was clarity. Within 48 hours of launching the site, the secure inbox was flooded beyond anything we had anticipated. Messages arrived at every hour, long, carefully written accounts and brief, urgent notes that felt like confessions finally given permission to exist. Some came from former friends who described fractured relationships that had once seemed inexplicable. Others were from business contacts who recounted deals derailed by manipulation disguised as charm. One message in particular stood apart. An ex-boyfriend from years before my relationship with Victoria, who described a pattern so eerily familiar it felt like reading a prequel to my own experience. Emotional coercion, financial dependency, Isolation masked as intimacy. We approached every submission with deliberate caution. Clara insisted on a verification process that was both rigorous and fair. Each account required documentation where possible: screenshots, timestamps, transaction records, corroborating witnesses. We cross-referenced identities and timelines, removing anything that could not be substantiated beyond reasonable doubt. Only those entries supported by clear, verifiable evidence were published. It was slow work, meticulous and often emotionally draining, but necessary. The purpose of the site was clarity, not accusation. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. Victoria's social media presence, once meticulously curated and relentlessly active, went silent. Her attempt to reopen the divorce settlement was abruptly withdrawn, without explanation. Calls from her legal representation ceased entirely. According to Connor, who continued to function as an informal conduit for industry gossip, the reaction within Austin's public relations circles had been swift and decisive. "People are sharing that site everywhere," he told me over the phone, his voice equal parts astonishment and caution. "No one wants association. I heard the Hale Development holiday event was quietly canceled. Apparently, attendance projections collapsed overnight." I felt no triumph in hearing this, only a weary sense of resolution, like a long-held tension finally releasing its grip. Clara observed my expression and spoke with gentle practicality. "You didn't set out to destroy her," she said. "You set boundaries when she refused to stop crossing them." She was right. We had not acted until every alternative had been exhausted. The site existed not as retaliation, but as protection, an acknowledgement that silence had only prolonged the damage. Still, when the divorce was finally, irreversibly finalized, the emotional aftermath was more complex than I expected. Relief existed alongside a quieter, more ambiguous sensation that resembled mourning. Not grief for the person Victoria had been, but for the future I had once believed we were building together. There is a particular sadness in recognizing that an imagined life, no matter how flawed, will never exist. Clara recognized the weight of that moment without needing explanation. We marked the legal conclusion with a quiet dinner at home, no celebration beyond shared presence. "It's okay to feel conflicted," she told me softly. "You loved the version of her you believed in." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "And now I love the person I know you are," I replied. "No projections, no illusions. Just reality, and that feels more honest than anything I've known." Her smile held warmth that needed no interpretation. It was simple, unguarded, and real. 6 months later, life had established a new rhythm that felt both grounded and sustainable. Clara and I moved in together, merging our spaces into a home that reflected both our personalities, rather than performing a curated identity for anyone else. The environment felt lived in rather than displayed. Photographs in progress leaned against walls. My work notes shared space with her camera equipment, and nothing required justification beyond usefulness or joy. Professionally, the stability translated into growth. My company expanded steadily, supported by decisions made without distraction or compromise. Clara's photography shifted toward commercial projects, a transition initially prompted by the disruption to her reputation within certain social networks, but ultimately proving creatively and financially rewarding. What had begun as adaptation became opportunity. News of Victoria reached us only intermittently, through the diffuse network of acquaintances that forms any city's unofficial information system. Her relocation to Los Angeles had not unfolded as planned. After legal complications forced Michael Harrington to reconcile with his wife, Victoria's attempt to establish herself independently faltered. Industry connections that once opened doors now hesitated. Opportunities dissolved quietly. Eventually, she returned to Austin, residing in her parents' guest house, a retreat that stood in stark contrast to the carefully constructed image she had maintained for years. Rumors suggested a series of brief relationships, each more turbulent than the last. The professional reputation she had once cultivated so meticulously was diminished, not by any single event, but by accumulation. The website we had created expanded organically, referenced in professional discussions far beyond the city where it began. It became less a specific record, and more a general cautionary example of how unchecked behavior, once documented, acquires permanence. One evening, as Clara and I sat on our balcony, watching the sun lower itself over the Austin skyline, she asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed?" I considered the question carefully. Sometimes, I admitted. But when I do, I remember how much energy it required simply to sustain the appearance of that relationship. It was constant maintenance, anticipating reactions, managing expectations, absorbing tension. Living like that leaves little capacity for anything else. I slipped an arm around her shoulders. Now I have energy to live, I said, to build something real with someone who values who I am, not who they want me to become. She rested her head lightly against my shoulder. For what it's worth, she said, I prefer the real version, even the one who forgets to water plants and leaves coffee cups everywhere. I laughed softly. Those details make you human, she added. My phone vibrated with a news alert, one I had configured months earlier when the site first went live. I read the brief report, then handed the phone to Clara without commentary. The article described a high-speed accident involving Victoria, reckless driving, loss of control, impact with a concrete barrier. She had survived but sustained severe injuries requiring extensive reconstructive surgery. Clara read silently before speaking. That could have been your life, she said quietly. I shook my head gently. No, I replied. That would have been my responsibility, but never my life. Her choices were always her own. 2 days later, we received an unexpected visitor. Alina Hale stood in our living room, her composure intact, but visibly diminished by fatigue, an age that seemed to have advanced suddenly. I won't take much of your time, she said formally. I thought you should know the extent of Victoria's condition. The injuries are permanent. Her face, she paused, unable to complete the sentence. Her modeling contracts have been terminated. I nodded, uncertain what acknowledgement she sought. She keeps asking for you, Alina continued, voice controlled but brittle. She believes you will return now that she needs support. I'm sorry for your family's pain, I said carefully, but that chapter is closed. Gaze shifted briefly to Clara, who stood beside me with quiet steadiness. After a moment, she inclined her head. Stand, she said. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, I warned her that beauty alone would not sustain a life. She never listened. Left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Are you okay? Clara asked. I think so, I answered honestly. What happened is tragic, but it doesn't alter what we've built. Said slowly. It's strange, she said, how a single moment can redirect everything. Of Victoria's words from that final argument, the casual certainty with which she had dismissed me. Place you in 24 hours. Then perhaps I owe her one thing, I said softly, drawing Clara closer.